So, Elena, let's just dive straight into what we're going to talk about today, which is all about fats for athletes and the importance of fats, especially on those on a plant-based diet for sport. So, straight into the problem. What can happen if we're not eating enough fat as an athlete?
Oh, many things could happen, and some of these things will not be very nice, I have to say. First and foremost, remember that fat packs 1 gram of pure fat, packs 9 calories, which is more than double than calories in protein or carbohydrates. So if you try to reduce fat in your diet or to eliminate it altogether, you simply may not get enough energy for what you need and for what your athletic activities need or require. So you will not be performing, competing, training at an optimal level. Also, you will feel constantly fatigued. You will recover poorly from your exercises, from your training or competitions. Fat is very important for mental health and for brain health. So you may not notice that your focus suffers. Also, fat is very important for joint health and joint support. So you add poor concentration to poor joint health and you get a higher chance of injuries. So again, something very, very important for athletes and something that everyone wants to avoid as much as possible. Also, fat is paramount for good immune function, so for the function of our defense system. So you may not notice that you get all those colds and flus way too often for your liking. And that, of course, will affect your training and competing as well. And also, fat is important for hormones, hormone production, hormonal health. So, if you are a menstruating person, you may notice that your menstrual cycle has become irregular or it could disappear altogether. And also, insufficient fat, insufficient dietary fat, could affect your fertility, be it female, be it male. So, again, because fat is important for sex hormone production. So, these are just sort of very, very immediate and very noticeable things. And there are many, many, many other sort of sides to fats and insufficient fats in the diet, which and the signs and symptoms that could show on a longer term, in the longer run. So.
You made it sound like fat is kind of the center of everything, and I sort of agree. And I like how you brought up about hormones. Well, I like everything you brought up, but hormones is an interesting one because hormones are made out of cholesterol, which, as we know, is a type of fat. But we don't actually need cholesterol to make cholesterol in the body. So what kind of fats do we need to make our hormones and everything like that?
We need, I mean, again, I'm a bit biased because that was the topic of my research, of my master's dissertation, but uh, I'm a really famous or infamous pusher for omega 3 fats. And by omega 3 fats, I don't necessarily mean so called fish oil. So eicosapentaenoic acid and docosahexaenoic acid, so long chain polyunsaturated fatty acids. As you can see, I love throwing in long terms as well, sort of posh words. Anyway, we don't necessarily need those, but we should get shorter chain omega 3 alpha linolenic acid from our diet. And we can get it from linseeds, chia seeds, linseeds also called flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts, also some Nordic berries, like lingonberries, for example. Easier said than done in this case. But also like rapeseed oil or canola oil, and also flaxseed oil. So all those oily oily seeds and oily nuts like walnuts and their oils. So I think that's quite important because omega 3s, again, if I start, I would talk about them for months, but omega 3s, they are important for our cell membranes. They are important for our immune function. They are very important for our mood. And also, they are anti inflammatory. So, again, that helps exercise recovery. Or if you get an injury, healing from injuries. They support our heart health, which means, if we are talking about athletes, which means better athletic performance because you get more oxygen, your blood vessels function, but you get more oxygen. Also, omega 3s, they stimulate the production of a certain hormone called somatotropin. And somatotropin helps build muscle or repair muscle cells. And if you are a runner or any other type of athlete, you know that intense exercise destroys, damages some muscle cells, and you need to build them again. And that's how your muscle is constantly renewed, and that's how your muscles get stronger and get bigger. So, and so, yeah, so omega 3s, all that alpha linolenic acid. Obviously, some people say that we can't convert alpha linolenic into those sort of longer chain fish oil type oils. That's another very big question, but some of them can, some of them probably should consider supplementation, but this is something that you should talk with a health professional, nutritional professional. But that's why I would like to stress that we should try and get sufficient alpha linolenic from foods like flax seeds, like all those foods that I mentioned, flax seeds, chia seeds, their oils, walnuts, or rapeseed oil.
Yes, I totally agree. And actually, it's so interesting how omega 3s are important for so many different things. And I like that you say that, some people may want to supplement. For example, I supplement because I know that I have the Alzheimer's gene. So my brain just needs more DHA than other people who don't have this gene. So I make sure I'm getting my ALA from plants, from chia seeds, from flax seeds, but then I also supplement DHA on top of that because along that chain, like along, what do you call it, like the supply chain of DHA, I suppose, from plants to the DHA in your brain, each type of omega 3 along that conversion process has its own specific role, it seems.
Exactly. Yes, yes. Like longer chain
Mm.
EPA, eicosapentaenoic acid. It's more anti-inflammatory and it's very important for heart and blood vessel health. Whereas, as you said, DHA, the longest chain omega 3, is very important for brain health and development. So that's why, for example, I strongly recommend for pregnant ladies to supplement because it's very important for babies' brain development and also eye health. So again, if we go back to running or any other athletic sport, athletic activity, good eyesight, I say it does no harm at all. So yes, and also for all sensory systems. So even hearing could be affected if you are deficient in DHA, in long chain omega 3s. So yes, so it's something to be quite aware of.
There are also some studies, you mentioned immune system before, and there are also some studies which suggest that, correct me if I'm wrong, that athletes tend to be lower in vitamin D than the rest of the population, which confused me at first because in my head, athletes are outside more. But then I guess actually a lot of athletes train inside as well. But potentially, this is more of a question. Could that be related to like not eating enough fats and not being able to absorb or like store more vitamin D?
Yes, I think you hit the proverbial nail. So, yes, because we need fat as well, or more precisely, we need cholesterol to synthesize our own vitamin D when we are exposed to sunlight. And yes, our liver produces at least 90% of all the cholesterol that we need, or 100% of the cholesterol that we need if we eat 100% plant-based diet, because cholesterol is only in animal foods. So yes, we need fats to produce our own vitamin D. So yes, that could be one of the major reasons why athletes, very sort of controversially, sometimes are deficient in vitamin D. And also another thing is, again, is there's always a fine line, a fine balance between getting vitamin D from sun, but also getting skin damage. So some people are very careful about skin cancers, especially, if you have like light complexion, red hair and stuff. So again, it's one has to be really, really careful. So people use sunscreens. So again, if you use sunscreen, you are protected from damage, skin damage from sun, but you don't synthesize your vitamin D, because so it's always so tricky to know and to say. And sometimes I think sometimes it's better to be safe than sorry. So again, vitamin D supplementation is quite often the answer. And obviously the testing for vitamin D, body levels of vitamin D, are very simple and could be done on the NHS or even privately. It's not terribly expensive. So it's, yeah.
Some people also need more vitamin D than others. I mean, I always recommend that people supplement just because of the things you've just
Mhm.
mentioned,
Yep.
sun cream, but also you're not outside all the time. And half
Exactly.
of the year is spent, or most of the year is spent with not enough sun anyway. But on top of that, there are some genes related to the vitamin D receptors, which means that some people need a higher amount of vitamin D to have the same effect. So yeah, this is another reason why I just recommend that actually everybody supplements vitamin D just to be on the safe side.
Yes. Yeah, actually, so do I, because yes. And if someone is really reluctant, then I suggest testing it. So
Mhm.
it's, yeah, and then, and then usually it shows that they are very low in vitamin D. So
Mm.
it's,
So, when it comes to eating enough fat as an athlete, I mean, I know I've done this as well in the past. A lot of athletes and runners tend to reduce their fat intake to make room for carbohydrates and protein because, the kind of hierarchy in your head is carbs, getting enough for energy, protein, getting enough for muscle growth and synthesis and repair. And then, if you have some extra calorific intake left over, you can squeeze the fat in there. But as you mentioned earlier, fat is uh, more energy dense than carbohydrate and protein. So fat has 9 calories per gram, whereas I think carbs and protein are 3. So
four,
4.
four carbs 3.75 and
Okay.
protein 4. So
So it is a significant amount of more energy. Um, and if you're trying to make sure that your energy intake matches with your energy output as an athlete, then sometimes fats go by the wayside. So how do we know whether we're eating enough fat as an athlete?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. And actually, it's not only energy output, but some athletes need to maintain higher body weight because of their, like, boxing, kickboxing, they have all those weight
Mm-hmm.
categories. Or sumo, but that's another another thing. So sometimes they need to eat more calories just to maintain that required body weight. So how do we know? Well, again, if you feel constantly tired or if you get cravings, or even more specifically, very often cravings for things like crisps or shop bought ultra processed pizzas and all those sort of very, really very salty, very fatty foods, that could be the sign that you are not getting enough fats. And interestingly, that could be the sign that you are not getting enough omega 3s. Also, if you are in constant low mood, so again, or even depression for no sort of other explainable reason, that could be another sign. And then again, if you get colds, flus, sniffles, or even if you've become much more allergic, like get hay fever much more often, that could be another sign of not enough fat in the diet. And another thing is interesting, skin needs good fats as well. Skin needs omega-3 and omega-6 as well. So, for example, acne. Obviously, acne could be the sign of too much saturated fats, especially from dairy or processed foods. But on the other end of the spectrum, acne could be the sign of not enough fat in the diet, and that's it. So, again, if you get dry, flaky, irritated skin or sort of acne, flare ups of acne or rosacea, that could be another sign of not enough fat in the diet. So, yeah. And again, as I mentioned before, things like difficulties concentrating, so all sort of brain function, brain health related things. So, obviously, all these things that I said, also low energy, concentration, skin, they could be signs of something else. So it's always best is just to see what is going on, and if necessary to do some health checks, or because again they could be caused by something else. And another thing that I wanted to mention, also, fats are very important for absorption of fat soluble vitamins, so A, D, E, and K. We've already spoken about D and vitamin D and all the issues related to it. But for example, if you notice that your night vision is impaired, that could be that's a sign that you are not getting enough beta carotene from the diet, and you are not absorbing it well, and you need fat to absorb it well and then to convert it into vitamin A. And or for example, again, menstrual irregularities or disappeared menstrual cycle could be a sign of not enough fat in the diet, but they could be a sign of not enough vitamin E, so another fat soluble vitamin, or poor absorption of vitamin E in the body. So yeah, as everything in the body, everything is very, very sort of interconnected, and everything, one small thing can affect many other things, and the other way around.
Yeah, I know that when I was going through, the thing is, you don't even notice that these things are happening because all these symptoms and these effects that you have talked about creep up over time. And
Yes.
until they get really bad and they really start to interfere with your running, for example, you tend to not really notice. And I know that I wasn't eating enough fat before, and when I started eating more fat because I learned I had the Alzheimer's gene and I needed to increase my fat intake for my brain health, I saw that everything else improved as well. My
Yeah.
running also improved, which is not something I'd expected. So, and it's not something I'd attributed to fat intake. So it was very interesting to observe that.
Yes, and I could add, very often people start getting colds very often, so they increase their vitamin C intake to a level that they start getting constant diarrhea, because that's what's happened if
Mm.
you overdo with vitamin C supplementation.
Mm.
So again, instead of sort of increasing their fats, they increase vitamin C and no results. And yeah, yeah, many, many stories like that. So yes. Or yeah, the things with immune system, zinc supplements, for example, again, to improve the immune function, but with no results. When you know what you need is just a bit of good fats, or people start drinking more and more water because they see problems with dry skin. And obviously, water is very important, and for training athletes, even more so. And water is very important for skin health. But sometimes you can drink 5 liters of water a day and your skin will not become less dry. So it's because, yeah. So it's, yes.
This is a very good point because many people, myself included, sometimes when you have a problem, you want one solution. You want one thing to be the magic pill, so to say. So you want to take vitamin C or whatever, and you want it to solve everything. And that could be part of the problem, but it's everything is so intertwined that it's the connection and the interactions between all of these nutrients which matter, not the individual nutrients themselves most of the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Such a good point.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So some people, we know from genetics now that some people are more prone to weight gain than other
Mhm.
people. And if you're one of these people, again, fat tends to be the thing you cut out first or cut down on first because of the energy density. What would you recommend regarding fat intake in people who appear to be prone to weight gain?
I would recommend getting fat from whole food sources. I would not recommend to eliminate fat from the diet because if you don't eat any fat, you will feel constantly hungry, and then whatever diet you are trying to to follow, it will go out of the window sooner or later, and you would be constantly hungry, you would get constant cravings, your mood would be extremely low. So, and all these things, I mean, they are not nice, they are not conducive to good health, good mental health, good physical health, and obviously they are going to impair your athletic performance as well. But getting fats from natural sources, so from the whole, with a whole package that comes with a food that has fat in it, also called food matrix. For example, if you eat nuts, you get a good balance of omega 6 and some omega 3, as well as little bit of saturated fats, because we need little bit of saturated fats. And with a little bit of monounsaturated fats, so we'll get all healthy fats in good proportion. We will get some good fibers, which feed beneficial bacteria in our gut, which then in turn helps and supports our immune system, our heart, our blood vessels, and our mental health, everything. We will get other nutrients like protein and also micronutrients like magnesium, zinc, some iron, also B group vitamins, and all the phytochemicals. So plant chemicals, all those nutrients that are neither macronutrients nor micronutrients, but they are extremely important for good function in our body and good performance and good recovery. So yeah, so get, and from what I know from all the research that I read, actually weight gain is not associated with nut consumption, even if nuts, they are quite caloric if you look at the sort of at their chemical composition. But there are no studies that show that if you eat plenty of nuts within reason, obviously, 2 kilos nuts a day probably wouldn't be a very good idea, also because then your digestive system would suffer. So but yeah, so get your good fats from nuts, and also eating nuts will keep your energy levels up. You will not get cravings and your mood will be good. So obviously, again, I mean nuts like raw nuts, not roasted, salted, and whatever flavored nuts. But yes, aim for those. And also other good natural plant-based whole food sources of good fats, like oats, for example. They have a good quantity of fats and like millions of other nutrients. And things even like soya. Soya has quite a bit of omega 6, but again, and a bit of omega 3, so good proportion of fats. But like tempeh, and again, with tempeh, you also get plenty of zinc, important for the immune system. You get plenty of protein, complete protein, so very important for sports people. So, and other nutrients. So, yes, so yeah, good fats from whole food sources.
I don't know if I could live without nuts and seeds. Elena, seriously, I eat them every day, multiple times a day, and I don't understand how people live without them. You mentioned something interesting, which was to eat raw nuts rather than roasted nuts. And I agree with you in the sense that don't go down the snack aisle and get the roasted nuts covered in oil and salt. But I did see a research study a couple of months ago which suggested that roasted pumpkin seeds were better for you than raw pumpkin seeds because some of the nutrients were more bioavailable.
Mm.
So I
Yes.
personally, I dry roast my nuts at home. Actually, I use an air fryer with no oil. Just put them in the air fryer for 20 minutes on a lowish temperature, 160 degrees, and then not only did they taste better, but um, I like to think that they are better for me. But I'd love to get your opinion on this.
Yes, I completely agree. My worry is that some people over toast them. So again, we are talking about sort of that fine line because lightly toasted nuts and seeds, you absorb certain nutrients like zinc, for example, or calcium, or even iron from them better because toasting. No, I wouldn't even use the term roasting. I would say toasting, which is sort of some sort of lesser degree of heat. So, because phytic acid breaks down and phytic acid interferes with the absorption of certain nutrients. However, if you roast them too much, then fats, so those good oils in nuts and seeds, they oxidize, they react with oxygen, and then they start forming compounds that are not that good for us. So, again, so you know, air fryer, I think it's a brilliant idea because everything is very much controlled and temperature controlled. But so yeah, so it's again, that could be an option if you are careful with your toasting and you just really do it very lightly without browning, for example. Another option is, I suggest, I know not everyone likes because it changes the taste a little bit, is soaking nuts. Well, soaking seeds, I would say that's a bit over the top, but soaking nuts for like overnight or for 8 hours, or some nuts like cashew nuts for 4 hours. And then again, that dissolves a good deal, a good amount of that phytic acid. So again, that increases the bioavailability of the nutrients in them. But as I said, many people say, oh, I don't like the taste because then if I soak my nuts, they all start tasting the same, which actually yes, but again, it's if we are talking about taste, it's so subjective and everyone has to find what suits them and yes, and what works for them.
Yeah, if I had all the time in the world or just the motivation to make this habit, I would soak all my nuts, then dehydrate them and very, very lightly toast them. But
Oh
as it turns
well.
out, I don't think I have the
Yeah.
motivation to make that habit, but that would be optimal. I totally agree.
Yes.
Um, okay. So we've talked a lot about plant-based fats, and I mean, this is a plant-based podcast, but is there any difference in the quality between the fats you would get from animal-based products and plant-based foods?
Well, there is a certain difference because obviously, again, if we go back to omega 3s, so if you eat fish or seafood, you get preformed long chain omega 3s. So in that case, you don't even need to worry about how well you convert alpha linolenic acid into long chain polyunsaturated acids. But it's a plant-based podcast, so and I by no means I would promote or even condone eating fish because the more I know about fish or fishes, because they are individuals, highly intelligent and very social and so on. So yeah, so apart from ethical reasons, also fish. With fish, you get mercury, you get all that stuff that you don't want, all those heavy metals and plastic particles. But yes, I mean, those who focus strictly on nutrients, they might argue that yes, it's fish oils, so EPA and DHA, those long chain omega 3s, are better from fish than alpha linolenic from plants. But as I said, if you don't think that you convert well, use algae based omega 3 supplement. And that's where fish get their oils from. So they don't synthesize all those fish oils. They get oils from microalgae or from microplankton, which feeds on microalgae. So yeah, so that's the difference between omega 3s from plants and from animals, and mostly seafood. Otherwise, again, we need to not to think about separate nutrients, but the whole package that the nutrients come in. So saturated fats, again, if you eat saturated fats from dairy, from meat, you get all the things that you don't want to get. So you get too much saturated fat, you get all the pro-inflammatory arachidonic acid, another type of fat, which is in great quantities in animal foods. And then again, too much animal protein, and we know that too much animal protein is not good for our health. Too much too much heme iron could cause high ferritin levels in our body, and in the long run, high ferritin is associated with high risk of cancer. So yeah, so if we are talking specifically about one single nutrient, there probably would not be much different in certain fats from animals and from plants. But since we do not eat saturated fat molecules or omega-3 molecules, we eat food, we eat the whole food matrix, then there's massive difference between healthiness or wholesomeness of fats from animal sources and fats from plant-based sources.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And of course, I guess the higher amounts generally of saturated fats in animal-based foods compared to the higher amounts of more healthy fats, such as monounsaturated fats in plant-based foods. So even though they may not be that structurally different, there are different amounts of the the different fats, and that's something to take into account.
Yes, different amounts and different proportions as
Mm.
well. So,
Hmm.
yes, plant-based foods have many more monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats. And there is no discussion looking at all the evidence that monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats are much better for health, for
Hmm.
our health, than saturated fats.
Talking of polyunsaturated fats, we omega 6 gets a very bad rep because it's everywhere and we tend to have too much of it. However, it is an essential nutrient still. So if we're considering a whole food plant-based diet, is it still possible to get too much omega 6, and is this something we should be worried about if we're following a whole food plant-based diet?
Yes, it is if we are using oils, so concentrated sources of omega 6. And by oils, I mean sunflower oil, soybean oil, peanut oil. If you eat whole foods, so soya products, peanuts, or sunflower seeds, you get fiber, you get protein, you get all the other nutrients, and you get the right amount. Everything is balanced because nature knows what she's doing. So whereas oil is just a concentrated source of that fat. It's the same if you think about whole grains and refined grains. There's massive difference on how they affect our health. So you can get too much omega 6 if you use these oils or these concentrated sources of omega 6. And since in our body, omega 6 and omega 3 compete for the same enzymes that convert omega-3 into longer chain polyunsaturated acids, so EPA and DHA, that are very important for us. And same enzymes convert plant-based omega-6 linoleic acid into arachidonic acid, again, which we need up to a certain amount. So, but if we get too much omega-6, that will negatively affect our conversion of alpha linolenic to EPA and DHA, and that could be not very good. That could have some. So again, then we could become deficient in omega-3s, long chain omega-3s, with all the health consequences. So yes, you can overdo with omega-6, but if you get your omega-6, and we need some omega-6 because omega-6 help to regulate our immune system. They help to regulate our blood lipids. They're also very important for skin health. So skin health, skin integrity. So we need a good amount of omega-6. But yeah, it's better to get it from natural whole food sources.
Okay, this might be quite hard, but what are your top 5 sources of fat that you think athletes should be focusing on the most?
Oh, nuts. Number one, definitely nuts. Because good fats, loads of other nutrients, good energy, stable energy, so they keep you full for longer. You can run without feeling sort of that you are running out of steam. So yeah, so nuts. Second is seeds. Why I said nuts before seeds? Because nuts are simpler to carry around and to grab as a snack. Because if if you have a little bag of seeds and it gets open in your bag, then you know what mess becomes of it. So yes, but other so the source number two is seeds, because again, things like sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, they are just whole, sorry for the cliche, but nutritional powerhouses. But that's what they are. So very, very important, not because just of the fats, but of all hundreds of other important nutrients. Number three, well, I would say extra virgin olive oil. And now I'm sort of treading off a bit of thin ice because oil is not a whole food. But again, there is such a plethora of research showing that cold press, good quality extra virgin olive oil is so rich in all the polyphenols, like hundreds of different very anti-inflammatory and even very anti-carcinogenic molecules. So again, it's something that, especially if you're one of those athletes who burns a lot of calories or who needs to maintain higher body weight, so that's another good source. So to add to your salads, onto your bread, or if you cook with oil, so well, sparingly use it for cooking as well. But I always discourage people from cooking with fats. I say add, if you use oil, add it after you cooked your meal. So number three would be avocados. So again, sometimes obviously there are concerns about their environmental impact, but I noticed that you can get avocados from Spain or from Israel, which means they are shipped by either by water or by land transport, and not flown in by planes, like avocados from Peru, for example. So again, sort of, if you are a bit worried about the environmental impact, look for Hass avocados from Spain, for example. But they are good, and again, they are good source of fats, very good source of fiber, vitamin E, so they have plenty of good stuff. And number five, uh, hmm, no, I think I can't see one, because I would like to put oats or soy or peanuts or peanut butter. When I feel naughty, it's peanut butter, but it's usually peanuts. So, and lightly toasted peanuts, haha. So,
Wait a second. Why are peanuts naughty?
No, peanut butter. It's simply because if I start eating it, then I have problems stopping eating it. So
Okay,
yes.
so this is a personal problem, but
Yes, very personal, extremely personal. Yes, I know. Self-control and yes, yeah, but oh,
okay. And if you had to give one piece of advice to our listeners today who will mainly be runners, what's
Mhm.
one thing they can do today or this week, maybe, that could improve their running, in your opinion?
I would say focus on whole foods. It sounds like I'm banging about
Mm,
this on and on and on, but that's really so important because how whole food affects your overall health and stamina and recovery and the whole athletic performance is such a massive difference from how all those ultra processed and sort of overdone, over elaborated foods affect us. It's again, it seems unbelievable, and people often don't notice that or attribute those differences to other things. But yes, it's just whole food. It's a whole different world for health and also for satiety, for energy, and for mental health. So again, something that you don't think immediately when you think about food, but
mm.
yeah, it's very important. So yeah, whole foods, whole food, plant-based diet.
So, Elena, where can we find out more about you? I've heard about some of the work you're doing, and you're doing an incredible amount of good work. So, tell us where we can find out more about you, follow the work you're doing, and everything else.
Oh, you can find me on the database of plant-based health professionals UK. Then I have my website, and I have to confess, well, I do so many things that I don't find time to update it very often and very diligently. So, but anyway, my website has a contact me form, so you can find me and contact me through it, and it's www.elenahealthfood, so all connected.com. I'm also on Facebook, and I'm the Elena Health and Food. So my page is. So, and I'm also on LinkedIn, but again, I'm not terribly active on LinkedIn, but you can find me there. So yes. And yes, or again, you will find my email address or my phone number on my website. And yes, and I always try and answer as soon and as thoroughly as possible.
Thank you so much. It was great talking to you and picking your brains on fats. You know an awful lot, so it was very interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. No, it's been a total pleasure for me. So it's very interesting. And I could talk about food and what food does to us for days. So
Maybe we'll have you
I would
back on.
brilliant. Yes. Yes, I would love to. Yes.
Thanks, Elena.